Make a poster, a mobile, a puppet, or a painting. Write another ending. How would you end this story? They love that one. Oh, I don't want it to end sadly. I want, happiness, or I don't care. I want to kill that one off. But anyway, they had an opinion, and so they need to be able to write a different ending. Write a poem. Boy, did I get the and when they got through, they loved it, and they had some of the best poems. Oh, they were so good. But it took a lot of groaning and write 5 new titles. Synthesis, doing something with the story, and then the highest one, like David Sousa told us, is to evaluate. Was that main character good or bad, but why? Would you recommend or not recommend this story to a friend? Everybody knows in this whole area out here that I read 6, 7 books a week, and they want to come up and ask me which ones are good. Well, good for what? Would you recommend what you're reading? For what purpose? Or take 2 characters and judge them. How could you do it better? I like this one. Was the story worth the time it took you to read it, and why or why not? That one really hit home with the high school seniors. They didn't want to read until they finally got hooked. Was the story worth the time it took to read? Yes or no? Why? And some of them said, well, it really was. I liked that one part anyway. They hadn't realized that they did enjoy some parts of it. When they saw a signed book, of course, their backs went up. Oh, this is signed. They didn't get a choice, and that's why I did it purposely. They didn't get a choice. And then I wanted to see if they really thought it was worth the time. It wasn't a long one. And someone said, well, now that I finished it, I liked it. Now that I can see that it does have some application. If you had the opportunity to go where this story, would you go there? Could this have really happened? And then we ended up with write a letter to the author and tell him or her why you liked or disliked the book. And they did. I was just amazed. So go through the different steps with your literature. That's coming from Bloom. So that goes along with the pondering. And the next step, of course, is participating. How's this going to work? As we talk about all this literature, these next 6 classes, what will I do, or what will the students actually do? Will you just read to them? Or will they read to you? Or will they work in groups? What will they do to learn, to model, to demonstrate, to understand? What strategies will I do to encourage active participation? So participating is so important with the literature. And then, how will I present it? How will I, as the teacher, present this lesson? How will I provide comprehensible input? That's coming from the ELL students and the bilingual. What we need to do is have comprehensible input. So much of what teachers say sometimes is not comprehensible to the children. It goes in one ear and out the other ear, like David Sousa taught us. If it didn't have sense and meaning, then I see no sense of it. Remember, he said, if you live by the fire engine, by the fire station, at first you say, oh, there's a fire. I hear the fire engine. And then pretty soon you say, there must be a fire someplace, but you don't, it doesn't go into your brain. And a lot of things you say in the classroom doesn't have sense and meaning to these students. So what activities will they use? What will the students do to show me they learned that? What will they do with this literature? And how will we put it into practice? What do I hope for? Do I hope they'll all be great readers? Do I hope they'll all read 1,000 books? Do I hope they'll even read 1 book? And will it show up on the testing? My one grandson right now is applying to go to BYU. And one of the questions that he had to answer was, which books were influential in your life? What books have you read that have been influential? And so he had to think about it. Well, I don't know for sure. I better go back and see. And I like that one about so-and-so. And And they made him really go back and think about what he'd learned. And so they might need that to get into college, or somebody might ask him, so how are they going to put it into practice? So we know those things. That's a good review, I hope, of the 7 Ps, and also comprehensible. Remember, I love this picture. It's called Growing Up Reading. How many of you grew up reading? Hiding under a blanket, one more minute, let me finish one more chapter, buy me one more book. I thought it was really sad because I was at Davis Elementary last week, not Davis and Vernal, but Davis in Davis District. And in the one school I was in, 75% of them speak a language other than English, not as a primary or their secondary. But 21% of them are considered homeless. They don't really, they're in a house right now, or they're in an apartment right now, or they're staying with someone right now. But a lot of the refugees are settling through there, and a lot of the Hispanic workers. And when I asked how many of them owned a book, they did not. They did not. And they didn't care because they'd rather have a blanket. So growing up reading, how lucky we are to grow up reading. This book is from the BYU. Let me show you the people that wrote the book you're going to be studying. This is Michael Tunnell. He's one of the authors of the text we use, and he talks about how important it was to grow up reading. As a father, he's trying to show his children how important it is for dads to read. And then the other person that helps write our book is Terrell Young, and he tells about his story. So it's so important that someone tells somebody, especially men, telling other young men that reading is not a sissy thing. Reading is a great thing. And these are all the books over here that he has written. There's one here called Mailing May. I was in the class when that came out. He asked everybody at the college level to write a story, write a book. We thought, write a book? I just want to get out of this class, you know. We were just typical like everybody else. But this one person wrote a book, and she said, I lived in Provo, and my grandmother lived in Idaho, which was a long ways away from Provo because my folks didn't travel. And I really wanted to go see Grandma. So she thought, how can I do that? I'm only a little child. I'm only 7 years old. She started when she was 5, wanting to go up to Idaho to see Grandma. And then she found out that there's a train that goes that way, but she couldn't go on a train by herself, and she wasn't sure how to do that. But Grandma was on a farm, and Grandpa and Grandma would call down to Provo and order chickens to come to the farm. And if you are out here in Roseville right now, the Tractor Supply is selling baby chickens, and so the train would take the baby chickens. And she thought, if chickens can do it, why can't I? This little girl thought. She was very optimistic. And she thought, I'm just a little girl. So she started talking to the neighbors. The neighbors knew a man that worked on the train. And he said, well, she's only 50 pounds, and we have a limit. Anything under 60 can go in the baggage compartment. I'll take her on the train. So they mailed May. Her name was May. It's the cutest story about how she gets on the train, and they take her to Grandma because she could ride with the chickens. They mailed May. She wrote a personal story, and it turned out to be a book, and she published it. And the rest of us just wrote funny stories. But she made something great out of that assignment, and he helped her to publish it. So Mailing May. So if you ever see that book, it's a fun one of how to solve a problem. You really wanted to go see Grandma. She had no way to get there. But this is a book that BYU puts out all the time, and they love to have everybody growing up reading. Okay, I want to ask you a question. Think about now, how did you love to learn to read or didn't love to learn to read? So think about, how did I grow up? Did I grow up reading? Did people read to me? How did I learn to read? Take a few minutes and ponder in your mind now, why do I love to read, or why don't I like to read so much? So take 3 or 4 minutes now and think about your own past. Okay, Laura is here in our class, and I've asked her to share first. How did she learn to read or like to read, or tell me about her past?
Well, my first memory of reading was when I went to kindergarten. I hadn't been able to read yet, but we went to the library, and I kept pulling out books and looking at them, and I was very excited. And the lady came up to me and she said, "You can take that home with you." And I was so excited. We didn't have a lot growing up, and so I was able to check out the books and take them home. And I had an older sister, so I think as she learned to read, I learned to read really young. And from that time on, because the books were free in the library, I just always read.
Attitude and opportunity and somebody sharing. What about Bonnie? Bonnie, tell us your experience, please.
My mom read to me a lot, and she took time to teach me how to read before I went to kindergarten because my older brother had struggled and she didn't want me to have the same troubles. She celebrated reading with me. As I learned to read, she would make a train car out of construction paper and put it on the wall for each book that I read. And the other one I would say is my kindergarten teacher. Since I could read, and at that point, nobody else in the kindergarten class could read, she took me to the library and introduced me to the librarian, who made arrangements with me to be able to check out books from the school library. So all of those really helped.
Wonderful. Support people. That's really important. Maria, how did you learn to read, please? Or love to read or not love?
I think it started in 11th grade. I had a lot of friends who loved reading, and I remember the Twilight books came out. So all of my friends were reading them, and then I remember waiting in line to meet the author of Twilight for like 3 hours in Manhattan because I'm from New York, and I got her autograph. And I guess just being around people that love to read got me to want to read. And then in 12th grade, I had an awesome English teacher who was a linguist, and she inspired me to want to go to school and get my master's degree and become an English teacher. So that's how it all came to be.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me show you something here a minute. Let me put it back here. We're going to be talking a lot about the Newbery and the Caldecott. This is called The Creepiest Place to Read, this Newbery Award-winning author's newest book. This man's from Salt Lake. And when you get home tonight, I want you to type in his name, Kristen McKay Heidecker there. And he has just come out with a new book called Scary Stories for Young Foxes. There are 6 of them, 6 stories in here that he wrote. He went around the graveyards in Salt Lake, he said. Now I don't know if I want my boy running around the graveyard, but that's where the Salt Lake City Cemetery is a perfect place to enjoy these books. They're mostly for middle grades, but it shows about the danger of the forest and the urban life, and it plays with traditional horror stories, but it's a good one for Halloween coming up. So if you will go on the internet, of course, you can hear him read it. If you'll type in his name, Kristen McKay, Heidicker, he'll read the stories to you, and you can hear his voice. He'll tell you his story. I think that would be a good way. He got hooked on it by the Bernstein Bears. He thought they wore human clothes, and that was so funny for him that he got interested in reading when he was real young. And he's a Salt Lake author, and so if you'll type in when you get home tonight, or when you get a break here tonight, type in Scary Stories for Young Foxes, or type in his name, Christian McKay Heidecker, and he'll read it to you, and he has a good voice, a scary voice, and this would be a fun way to do for Halloween that's coming up. Okay.
Louise?
Yes.
So you said, what's the youngest you said you would go with that story?
This one, he recommends middle age. But I read it to, 4th graders, and they didn't think it was scary. But that's as low as I've gone, because I just barely bought it. It's brand new.
Okay,
I haven't
thank
had
you.
a chance to do a lot with it, yeah. 4th graders were not afraid. one little girl said, I don't like foxes. She'd never seen one. She didn't know what it was, but yeah, fourth grade is the lowest I went, but. So that's something I wanted to share with you, scary stories for young foxes. Anybody else would like to share tonight about how you liked or didn't like to read or learn to read? I don't want to force people, but we love to hear from you if you would like to share.
I'll share. This is Nicole
Okay, go ahead,
Fulgham.
please.
So when I was probably about preschool age, my mom, in order to supplement income, started doing daycare. And so she had other people's kids in our house. And I remember she implemented story time, and we had these little like rugs that we sat on while she read these picture books to us. One includes the Pickle book. And that was like my first really experienced being read to. And then as a family, to as kids, she would read us the Boxcar Children books, and she loved those. I never loved them as much as she did. And that was kind of like my first experience. And then it's interesting because my first couple of years in school, like first and second grade, I was a struggling reader. And then something about second grade, it like clicked for me, and I have just been a voracious reader since then, and I read more than my mom ever did. So it's just that beginning thing. And so actually those same books that my mom read to me and my younger siblings and those daycare kids, she reads to her grandkids now, and it's really fun. So when you asked that question, I really dug back, and it was just, I remember sitting in our living room on this little like carpet square, listening to her read the Pickle book about pickle things and the things they are and what they won't be. So
You brought up so many good things there. Yeah, experience and people that matter to you, and modeling, and just all those good things. Those are good things that we should be doing, and no matter what class we're teaching, whether we're I walk through the high school and they'll say, what are you reading now? What's good? What's good out there? I want to read what's good. Or what do you know about horses? Or what book do you read about? Yeah. Anybody else want to share? Okay, if you look at the agenda, this is what we're doing. It says right here, after the 7 P's review, this is a literature class. So we start with a timely piece for P for participation. We are participating right now. We're sharing. That's one thing that a lot of the teachers forget to do sometimes. They read to the child, and that's good. That's good they do. But the child needs to participate too, no matter what age, no matter what age. And if I tried bringing up his book on the internet so I could read it to you here, but the system isn't that good here. So I'll have you, when you go home tonight, type in his name, and you'll get to listen to Christian McKay Heidecker read one of his stories called Scary Stories for Young Foxes. And just his voice and his tone and the way he catches you and makes you part of the experience. Okay, using the 7 P's then, this is what we're doing tonight. This class will have a purpose. You will have the opportunity to read lots of books that interest you, no set list. I am fighting with the state office of education like mad right now, because they always make a set list. Seniors will read this, and the 7th graders read that. I think that's the worst thing you can do. So I'm at odds with them right now, but they're coming around. But no set list to read. We need to explore in a variety. So Jesse, even though you're a male, you need to read a few books about females. All you females need to read a few books about males. All the seniors need to read about some picture books, some kindergarten books. We need to look at a variety of literature, a variety. So we will be looking at a variety. So my purpose then is to encourage you to look at each piece of literature as a valued piece of your instruction. How could I use this? If I was told by my instructor that I had to use this, or I wanted to use it, how can I use it in my class? P for principal. Teachers of older students and younger students. I hear this all the time. Oh, they're too young or too old. You might have a kindergartner who's reading on the 4th grade level.
I need
Yeah.
a 6th grader. I need some books
Yeah, sixth grade. Laura has a sixth grader. You might have children in seventh grade that's reading on a first grade level. So the younger and older is not the thing to use. They need to look and use them at every different grade. I want to show you something. I'm going to go walk around the table to the other side here and show you something I saw today I thought was so interesting. I have to walk clear around here, so don't go away. This isn't the most set up room. Okay, I went to a high school today, and this is one of the books they were using in the high school. It's a great big book called All to Build a Snowman, because snow came out here. And in the ninth grade today, it's just a great big picture book by Houghton Mifflin showing how to build a snowman. Very simple, beautiful pictures, how to build a snowman. That seventh grade male teacher had those children so involved today about how they were going to build their first snowman. Of course, he had a purpose. He was going toward what snow is and weather, and he had a purpose where he was going. But he introduced it by how to build a snowman, because he knew they had prior knowledge. Even if we were just putting balls together and putting a carrot in there, but some of them had wonderful ideas. They wanted to do an art project. They wanted to go build a snowman. Of course, it's melted right now, so they have to wait a little while. But he had those seventh grade students so involved, leading toward what he was really going to talk about by using just a great big picture book. Then I saw another one today. People were talking about Zoom. Well, they know, everybody knows what Zoom is. But this little boy came to class today. He's sixth grade. He should have been in seventh, but he's in sixth grade right now. He said, I couldn't come today because I had to help my mother. And it turns out that his mother is in a wheelchair. So to him, Zooming meant riding with his mother in a wheelchair. And they got the best story out of him today of just telling about his home life, because Zoom had a different meaning to him than Zooming over the television. He told about how he had to help his mother, and saw that one used today. And then the last one I wanted to show you was the weather one. I saw this used in the 8th grade today. What will the weather be like today? Of course, he was leading toward a science unit. But he introduced it, and the children laughed, and they talked, and they participated, and they looked at the pictures, and they talked about the weather, and they talked about, well, what's the temperature? Well, how do you spell temperature? Well, what's the barometer? Well, how do you measure things? It was a wonderful lead-in to his science lesson. What will the weather be like today? That was, I think, in 7th and 8th, I saw them both. And then the last one was a bilingual class. It takes a village. It takes a village, all of us. We all have a part. And not one of the children, of course, in our Roosevelt class knew anything about these kind of hutches like that, where they have to build them out of straws or what. They had no idea. They started talking about the refugees coming from Afghanistan. So it was toward a purpose. It wasn't just to take up time, but using big books, as simple as that, in a high school and junior high level.
They love it. Kids
They
love
love
to
it.
be read to.
They do love it, And the teachers used it so effectively. He didn't take a lot of time with it. It wasn't a waste of time, but he led into what he was doing. He had their attention. He had their participation. So on the next one then is P is for probe. Why should you use varied literature? Why should we use picture books and different things? I have thought of 18 possible answers. I want you to take 4 or 5 minutes now and see if you can think about and write down 2 or 3 reasons why should we use varied literature. Young literature, literature that like we would think for young children or older children or science. And then I'm going to call on some of you, please, to tell me why you think we should use all various kinds of literature. So, questions, what we're doing for a few minutes. We're pondering, we're participating, we're coming up with a purpose, and we're probing. Why? Why should I use in my class varied types of literature? Talk to you in a few minutes. I'm going to ask Cheyenne first in a minute, so Cheyenne, be thinking about it. Then I'm going to ask Teresa. I'm going to see if Tony will answer, and Jesse. So that's 4 people that are on the hot seat right now. So think of a reason, you 4 at least, why I should use varied types of literature. Cheyenne, what are you thinking about? Why should you use different types, various kinds of literature? Tell us what you're thinking, Cheyenne.
So one of the reasons I came up with is that literature can teach a lot of different skills, whether that's reading skills or math or science. Like you were talking about earlier, a teacher using a picture book to talk about weather. So you can just use it to teach a lot of different content and a lot of different skills.
Exactly. Thank you. Jesse, why should we use varied kinds of literature?
I think the biggest thing for me when I look at it is everyone's so different. Everyone engages in such a different way. And so if we were to just base everything off of one thing, you're only engaging certain students. And so the more variety you have, the more engaging you can be. And some of the stories and stuff I read in class with the kids, I'm not necessarily into them as much as some of the kids are, but we're trying to engage, a classroom full of kids with a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different interests. And so the more variety we have, the more inclusion we're going to have in our classroom.
Really good. I told you that a lot of these students have been through level 2. Level 2, you do action research. Brindy and Maria and Kirsten and Lauren are in it right now, finishing up level 2. And there was a lady in Ogden, and she could not get those 2nd graders to read. She could not. So she brought this big, soft, velvet chair in. And if you wanted to tell your story, you had to read this book and sit in that chair. Everybody wanted to sit in the chair. By the end of the year, they were fighting to tell about their stories. Simple thing, didn't cost her anything. And she had them so involved to tell their story, to be the head, the people, everybody looking at me. Teresa, what do you think? Why should we use different kinds?
Well, right now I'm doing the AmeriCorps reading program at Fairview Elementary. But so I have different kids from all different age ranges coming in, and they each get to pick a different book. So it has taught me, there's a lot of books that I didn't think I'd really enjoy, but I don't really have a choice. So it's pushed me outside of my comfort zone. So I feel like for kids that would kind of be a